Well, we're back in the smoke-filled room. As you've seen in May, we're trying something a little different. So we don't have Chris, we don't have Michael. I'll tell you what, Michael's the really sad one this week. He told us this week he really missed being on SFR when the week he wasn't on. So I think we might have a revolt if those guys aren't allowed on when we get into June. So we'll probably have to revisit this. But for today, we have all experts from throughout the state who are with us. So let me do some introductions. We've got Mark Batinick. He's the former House Republican floor leader, a pollster, and a pension policy advisor now with the Illinois Policy Institute. What's going on, Mark?
I'm excited to be on again, as always.
Glad to have you. We get lots of praise whenever you're on, so I think you pay a lot of people off Chicago style to say nice things about you. We also, man, every time I keep getting stuck with this Dan Caulkins guy. Once again, we got Dan Caulkins. He's a former state representative from the 88th district, also an Army veteran. You were a businessman for a long time. And Dan, we're glad to have you here, making friends and enemies all at the same time.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's always fun to get to shout out to people and not have to throw bricks at my TV. It's a great outlet.
Well, and I mean, I'm throwing bricks every time I watch your social media and see you and your better half going off and enjoying yourselves and traveling while we're stuck here in Illinois. So the bricks come right back at you, my friend.
Thank you.
We also have with us returning Sharon Langlotz-Johnson. She's a policy expert and served as the supervisor for Palatine Township and as a police officer. Sharon, glad to have you.
Well, hello, Collin. It's always nice to hear you promote myself.
Well, see, there you go. Plus, what you're Dustin's godmother or whatever term that we'll use for you for our dog. So that's your most important title. All right. Well, I got to imagine, especially for you guys, Mark and Dan, not having to be down in Springfield right now. Poor Sharon obviously still has to deal with the Springfield craziness. I'm sure you guys don't mind not having to be down there right now. Let's get into some of these Springfield topics, especially when I ask you guys, Mark and Dan, with what we saw happen last week with Fred Crespo. I mean, have you guys seen anything like this before? I mean, I know Mary Flowers got booted out, but we're talking a couple weeks before the budget was due, having Crespo just completely booted from the caucus because he wouldn't get in line with their tax and spend agenda. This has got to be unprecedented. What does this mean for the caucus? I mean, I know there's been some quotes about, like Cisnowski was saying, this ain't a good sign. Illinoisans should be concerned that Speaker Welch has adopted a my way or the highway approach. He's not wrong there. What do you guys think?
Well, I came up with a term that Madigan was called the Velvet Hammer. I think Welch is going to be called the Sledgehammer. Definitely haven't seen anything like it. The only time I really recall Speaker Madigan even going after somebody of his own caucus is when his entire caucus was against Ken Duncan when he kind of aligned himself with Ronner and that whole agenda. And the difference in the Mary Flowers situation was that same thing. She had issues with many of the people within that Democratic caucus, long caucus meetings. Fred is a even-keeled, calm, reasonable individual. And he's the type of guy that, you don't get credit for actually doing your job in Springfield, unfortunately. You get credit for things that really aren't the main part of your job. Fred is one of the guys that does things like audit commission, works on the budget. These are boring things that the regular public doesn't know about. And he's a really hard worker, a really smart dude. And yeah, it's a progressive caucus, and he's out of it. And it's a shame for the state because if you're going to have Democrats leading the way on budget, leading the way on issues like this, you want a guy like Fred Crespo there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's I don't know about the sledgehammer. I call it a jackhammer, as I think it's a big mistake to do that. My first reaction was to reach out to the members of the House Republican caucus and say, you need to reach out to Fred, offer him a place, bring him in, put him on leadership, and make him part of your budget negotiations. I think that would have been the smart move. I don't know that Fred would have taken it, but this is a huge loss. And I think it's we saw what happened last year when they couldn't pass their tax and spend bill. They had to take 3 bites at the apple, and Fred wouldn't go for it. I don't know if they're going to have any more success this year, but Collin, they're talking about over $1 billion in taxes on all these services.
2 billion.
How many?
I mean, there's different
At least
proposals going
two.
around. You've got 6 billion in tax hike
Yeah,
proposals. You've got the service tax, which is going to be even more than that, I think, Sharon. And
yeah,
there's over 10 billion in different tax proposals that are floating out there. So
Yeah.
there's no shortage of options if you want to raise taxes.
yeah. One of the other times that Madigan did that was with Kalish, if you remember.
Yep.
He voted present on the abortion bill. And then, then they ran somebody against him. I do want to point out I don't know if you'll be able to see it here. The Freedom Fred poster
Freedom
going
Fred.
around.
Yeah, Zoom's
Zoom's
messing with it, but
yeah, it's kind of hard to show, but it's free. They have a Freedom Fred poster going around the house right now.
I think the difference with the Mark Kalish situation though is that was really personal PAC funding that primary challenge, and there were Democrats that were actually supporting Kalish. That wasn't coming from the speaker directly. That was just a regular inter-party squabble. So this is definitely coming directly from the speaker. Obviously, I think the difference here is Dan, you talked about the fact that he's not going to have luck with votes this time. I'm like, I don't know. The Democrats really think most of those Democrats really like their jobs and they don't want to be Fred Crespo, right? So if they don't get in line, if we have another situation like what we had last time with the budget, I think there's a lot of Democrats that are shaking that they better get in line, otherwise they're going to be on the outs.
That has to be part of this, Mark. I mean, this being such an unprecedented thing, part of the calculation has to be Crespo was never going to be with us. He was never going to vote for this budget. How can we scare people into voting for
it? Agreed.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because Fred's really one of the only, even as township supervisor, he was great to work with. He was on both sides. So
let's talk about the budget itself. I mean, what do they do here? I know there's the talk is that Pritzker has promised no tax hikes on individuals. Sorry, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know how they balance his budget without any sort of tax and fee hikes.
I'm losing. I said it would be an income tax. Was the only place I didn't see this huge move to tax services. I know they've been talking about it for a while, but I thought it would be a modest income tax increase. A 0.25%, 0.5% across the. It has to be across the board in Illinois. Because our structure, but this is something because now you can actually see it's $1 billion or $2 billion or $6 billion or whatever. This is something that Republicans can use, specifically dollars. When you say it's a 0.25% raise in your income tax or a 0.5% raise in your income tax, that's hard to wrap your hands around. But when you talk about taking $2, $3, $4 billion out of the pockets of the working men and women in this state, that's a message that I think will resonate this time.
I mean, Mark, I'm going to ask you specifically, just because you kind of think similar to me, and sometimes with this stuff, when it comes to putting on the tinfoil hat, I kind of have noticed like almost a shift. I wondered why the road builders and 150 and some of those groups didn't freak out when Pritzker took some of their money out of the road fund in his budget, and they were all totally okay with it. It seems like there's a whole plan, and there has been for months. They're going to put the service tax in place to cover transit, and then obviously some of that can be used for other infrastructure related items. Like, it definitely seems like this fix has been in for a long time, even though they've been playing like, oh, we're still working on it. Am I crazy?
Yeah, I don't think you're crazy, but you did bring up something that's important. I mean, I think there's over $3 billion sitting in the road fund right now. So, and the other thing that they can do that was in his introduced budget is the sales tax on gas, which is different than the road fund fee on tax. Sales part on tax was supposed to be phased back into the road fund. They can delay that and get, Sharon, maybe you know how many hundreds of millions of dollars that is, but there's a significant amount you can get from there. You can use some of the road fund potentially for some of the transportation stuff. You can't use it for operations, but you can use it for some of the infrastructure. They've already dialed back what they're going to spend on non-citizens, so they really care when they have money for it, but suddenly they don't care when you need to balance the budget. It's no longer the moral thing to do. Kind of amazing. And they can do some inter-fund borrowing and some things like that. I think the most frustrating thing about this is the biggest thing they're going to do is they're going to blame Trump. But before Trump was even in, the numbers were coming in below expectations, and it had nothing to do with, COGFA had a lower number than what Gabi had, but they're just conveniently trying to blame Trump for whatever whether it be a service tax or whatever it needs to be. They spend to the max when the money's flowing, and then they start new programs, and then there's a crisis when there's a little bit of a speed bump or a drop. If you can't balance a budget, like how many states out of the 50 are having trouble balancing a budget in this environment? I bet not many. I think it's quite possible we're the only one. This just shows that the short-term thought process that Democrats have of always spending to the max, never getting ahead on pensions, never getting ahead on interest payments and bond payments, everything else, never putting money towards that, always puts us in a bad situation where we're that friend that always has credit card debt, that's always renting a house instead of buying one, and we have to stop this cycle. It's extremely frustrating.
Well, the hypocrisy of these individuals were constantly railing on Chicago and CPS because they were saying, you're using COVID money to increase your spending base. You're like, you're doing the same thing. You've been doing it for years, and now here we are paying the price. I mean, Dan, Mark, you guys were down there for a long time. Sharon, you've been doing your job there for a long time. These projections that are worse than we expected, we've been seeing these projections for 5 years. It isn't like this has just even been 6 months. Like we're exactly where we predicted we would be years ago, well before. We're talking about the Trump economy has screwed us up. I mean, it's been obtuse since the very beginning, when even some of the media, and even like Rich Miller, has called out Pritzker for this, saying, you ran up these numbers that we all knew were fake, and now you're using that as a chance to say, oh, it's Trump's fault that the numbers aren't where our fake numbers thought they'd be. I mean, it's been obvious, and almost too obvious for people who tend to be more politically savvy. But the reality is, we've known this was coming for a long time.
Well, that was my first floor speech, was on the budget. Pritzker's first budget that he announced, and it was, by my calculations, over $1.5 billion unfunded. Turned out that it was even that and more because they didn't fund the pensions. But this is going to be you look at what's going on the national level and what's all of the jobs that are supposedly coming, that Trump's bringing in, the investments from all over the world. People want to come here and do business. We're going to miss that. We're going to miss that because people aren't going to bring that to Illinois, and this is going to be a cycle of an economic cycle in Illinois that is going to be very, very difficult to dig out of because of the policies that we have. And who wants to, I use this little metaphor. You've been asked to join a club, and the entry fee isn't much, but you find out that club is $100,000 in debt. And as soon as you join that club, you're going to get an assessment because you got to pay off that debt. Who wants to come in Illinois and build a factory knowing that you're billions and billions of dollars in debt, and the only way that debt gets paid off is when they tax you for being here?
Well, it's like anytime you buy a printer, right? They'll give you the printer for free because they're going to gouge you on the ink. I mean, it's exactly what, if you're a business owner, if you're looking at, where to invest your money, there's a reason why we're not creating private sector jobs in the state. Public sector jobs are at an all-time high, which that's great, but private sector jobs are what drive your economy, and they continue to lag our neighbors. They continue to lag the national economy, and that portends what your economy is going to look like 5, 10, 20 years down the line. So if they're struggling this much to balance the budget in the 2026 budget cycle, 27, 28, 29, 30, I mean, it ain't going to get much easier. The only thing, and we'll talk pensions in a little bit, the only thing that might save their butts is what's going to happen with pensions in the future. But they're going to spend us into the hole all the way to that point, which means there won't be savings to enjoy. But again, I don't want to steal Mark's thunder, so we'll talk about that in a bit. Let's talk. Oh, go ahead, Sharon. Close us out.
I was just going to say, we forget about all the cannabis money. That's close to $460 million that over the last 3-4 years that we've gotten in that no one ever had access to before. But, turn around, Pritzker's given money to China, to some company in China to make a whole, I think it was, we figured out there was a whole 50 jobs given for $20 million. I mean, 50 jobs for $20 million. He's giving away our tax dollars to make 20 jobs. Give me a break. And, but that's not just one time. That happens all the time. There are constant press releases with, Pritzker's giving this away, Pritzker's giving that away. When it's not his money, it's ours.
Yeah, well, and as we've talked about a lot the last couple of weeks, especially splashy press conferences don't create jobs. So
Yeah.
let's talk about. We talked a little bit about that service tax, but what we're hearing a lot, and maybe it's not true, we'll find out soon, is that if that service tax is expanded, it's going to be for transit reform, for the transit bailout, is really more accurate. And so let's talk about that. I mean, what are you guys hearing? Are those two things pretty tied at the hip? I know that some people tried to say recently that they're not, and then immediately Ram came back and said, no, 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 we are still looking at that service tax. So it definitely seems like, that's the direction they're going. And we've made that assumption for a while now that that's where they're going to go here. What are you guys hearing? And Dan, I already know how you feel about it, but is that a good idea or not? Because I mean, there are some people, some of the government, or I'm sorry, the business groups are like, maybe we could live with that. But raising taxes on working families never seems like a good idea to me.
We don't see a lot of the money out in the suburbs. So no, I wouldn't want it personally. I mean, they already don't give us enough services with the RTA, CTA on any of those.
I mean,
You already have.
Portion of this is going to bail out CTA, that's for sure.
And you already have, I think, 1% of the sales tax in like the Collar counties that goes to bail out the CTA pension fund. And I'm sure that 97 or so counties downstate are really going to love paying for a service tax to bail out transit up in the Chicago area. But you know what? There's not enough people down there. They don't like to vote in the off year for whatever reason. And this is what you not voted for if you didn't vote downstate. But I hope they don't. I think it's a little bit of a tricky messaging thing, though, to do exactly that for that reason, where you're taxing the entire state on sales for transit up in Chicago seems like a little bit of an odd thing. It's a little bit, when you're taxing gas for roads, it's a little bit easier, right? Or raising the license plate fees for roads and electric vehicles and all that. That's a little bit easier. Now, there is a fungibility to it, right? You can say the service tax is for something else and somehow move the gas sales tax over to transportation and stuff. But I'll be interested to see I hope they don't do this. Doesn't need to be done. I hope they don't do that. But there's implementation issues with sales tax, so we'll see.
Well, you can already see, House Republicans in some of their press conferences and some of their statements. I think Tony said it at the end of her latest statement, whether it was today or yesterday, where she said, if you don't live in northeastern Illinois, you should be paying attention. So clearly there's obviously an effort here to say, hey, if they're going to raise taxes on 96 counties to pay for transit in 6 counties, how do y'all feel about that? So that's definitely an intentional effort.
Well, yeah, and let's be honest, most of the collar counties don't use the transportation either. This is mostly a Cook County issue, right? So it's all but one. Everybody should be paying attention. Man, they just keep trampling on the golden goose. But
I think that's part of the thing here, which is I've talked a lot when we talk about transit of if it was more convenient, I would happily take it more. But here's the flip side of this. Everyone I've talked to around here, because I live in Cook County and we talk about this stuff, and everyone I talk to says, I don't take it. So what? You want to penalize us for not taking public transit, make us pay for something we're not actually ever going to use. I mean, the arguments here become really difficult to sell to the average household, the average voter. Now, obviously, it's an incumbent on us to, sell that, and we seem to be pretty bad at that. But maybe this is the thing. Maybe this is the time where we can say, hey, listen, you're all paying for something that you aren't using. Even Cook County residents, you're paying for something that the vast majority of you aren't using. Are you okay with that? I mean, the sales tax here as the solution. I think, as Dan said earlier, it's going to be a tough sell, but it's going to be incumbent on us to make sure that it's a tough sell.
Right, and this is this thing, Mark. And I mean, we talked about this. There's no spending reforms. Again, raising taxes, and no reforms. There's no spending reforms, and I really think in this environment, and we're going to have an opportunity when the Democrats, they have to raise something. They have to raise taxes to pay for everything. And I think this is an opportunity for Republicans to reach to the kitchen table issues, Mark, that you poll and that it's the cost of living. Why does it cost so much to live in Illinois? Why are people leaving? They can't afford the real estate taxes. And it goes on and on. And now you're going to take another billion, or I don't know, Sharon, 4 billion, 6 billion out of the pocketbooks. Discretionary spending goes away. What's this going to do to restaurants and hotels and entertainment? You're already seeing, there was an article, I think, in Cranes this week that talked about the restaurant business. People are splitting meals and they're not having cocktails. They're the Chicago restaurant business. And it's only going to get worse if they,
Landscaping, it's, it's even your basic stuff that you do. I mean, you're talking about adding another $10 to your landscaping bill a week. That starts to get over to the point you're like, not worth it. I'll do it myself.
or your haircut.
The job.
Or
Well, I
your,
mean,
You know about
for
haircuts.
those of us who need those services, I mean, I got a fresh haircut today, but not all you guys are going to be hit with that bill.
add
They should
6.5%.
only tax haircuts. That's it. Nothing else.
That's it.
It's like everyone's saying to just tax cigars, and that'll be the end of it. Like, you can all just keep targeting me. What the heck? I live such a horrible life. But I think, I mean, you look at some of these things, we always struggle as Republicans, as conservatives, we struggle to connect the tax with real world impact. And what I love about this as an issue for us, if the Democrats do this, is it's straight up a real world impact. I mean, you're talking about your streaming services, you're talking about Uber, your Lyft, your gym membership, your haircut, your car washes, your plumbing, your landscaping. I mean, this is what we struggle with, is taking these big billion-dollar, trillion-dollar numbers and making there be a real world impact for the average household. This one does it for us. I mean, it is almost foolproof, though. Again, we'll find some way to screw it up, but almost foolproof because of the fact that it has such an everyday, daily, real world impact. So if this is where Democrats want to go with this, again, I'll smile and say thanks for the gift, and then we got to go out there and make it worth it.
Well, the problem is, Colin, is not enough people are paying attention. And, if they're off and they're all, they're in their own little world, but we also have never been really good at getting our message out because we're not loud enough. And it's really, disappointing on many occasions to watch that happen, but we're just not mean enough, I guess you might say. We need to be meaner.
Now you sound like Pritzker. Sheesh, you
Well, I'm not going to tell people to riot, that's for sure.
Well, let's talk about another thing that has a real world impact, a cost of living impact, which is energy. I know we've talked about this a handful of times, including maybe with some of you guys, but House Republicans have been raising the alarm on this, as have the Senate Republicans, about how energy rates are going to be spiking here over the summer. I mean, there's going to be a spike in ComEd bills starting on June 1st, just when people start turning on their air conditioning and paying these costs. Of course, the green energy folks are all saying this is greed and capitalism, and this is ComEd's fault or whoever else's fault. But again, another situation where we've been predicting this for years, that if you remove energy producers from the grid, then naturally what's left is going to cost more. It's simple supply and demand. But here we are, and energy rates are going to be going up. People's utility bills are going to be going up. This hits households, this hits manufacturers, this hits small businesses, and it's a real world impact. So what do you guys think about this, and where do you think this goes?
We did that energy tour 5 years ago. Chris and Brad and I, and we went down to the coal-fired plant and the coal mine, and went to the solar fields. We went up to Clinton to the nuclear power plant, and we warned people back then that this is not the path that you want to go down. This is going to be expensive, no matter what your thoughts are. And we've rung the bell and rung the bell and rung the bell, and people, they don't seem to care. So you keep voting for folks that raise your cost of living, makes it harder to attract industry, harder to keep industry here, and it's harder for people on a fixed income to survive.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, when is it bad enough? And I know I got in trouble for that 2 years ago, but when is it going to be bad enough that the people of Illinois rise up and go, you know what, we've got to try something different? We have voted for these folks year after year after year for the last 30 years, except for maybe 2. And this is where we are. Isn't it time we try something different?
Well, and I was happy to see Tony really put the focus on not necessarily just the prices, but also the reliability. I mean, we work a lot with manufacturers, and that's a big deal when it comes to data centers, when it comes to manufacturers. It's not necessarily just price for them; it's reliability. If they lose a shift because they can't rely on the energy delivery, that's a huge deal to them. That hits their bottom line. So there's a lot when it comes to energy policy that the average household may not understand. But when this goes straight to job creation, it goes straight to a lot of things that matter to the state of Illinois economy.
the big energy users have an agreement with the power companies in order to get a better rate deal. They agree to shut down when we get to those crisis points. So I think you'll see manufacturing. That's where the first one goes, is manufacturing. And you'll see like our cat plant in Decatur, when things get bad this summer and Ameren says, hey, we're calling you in, shut her down until we stabilize the grid and we get enough electricity out here, to power things up.
They do that for people's homes too. I get a $40 credit on my bill every year just to let them cut off my air conditioning, which I don't use anyway most of the time. It's very rare for me to use my air conditioning because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
Well, look, we used to be a leader in this. When we did deregulation 10, 20 years ago, one of the few things that we left, we have high property tax, we have high workman's comp costs, we have a high regulatory climate, but we actually had cheap energy rates, and we were a net exporter of energy. And one of the things I'm most proud about is being against the 2016 ComEd bailout bill that actually was part of what landed the speaker in jail, or indicted, whatever he's doing these days, indicted, convicted. That was the start of everything. We're re-regulating again, we're raising prices. And here's the worst part about it that I would tell the energy people is that now we're a net importer. Definitely downstate. I'm not sure where we are upstate. Dan, you can talk about now. We have to import. Well, just because we're closing coal-fired power plants in Illinois and then importing coal-fired power plant electricity from Missouri and Indiana, it's like taking garbage from your yard and throwing it in your neighbor's yard and acting like you cleaned up the neighborhood. You did nothing. You did absolutely nothing. And it's something that we can be a big leader on, and we haven't been. And it's another thing on the long list of items they're one of the reasons why so many cat plants in Joliet, Peoria, and everywhere else have closed or not expanded is because of energy rates. The chem producers, they use a lot of energy. It's an important thing for manufacturing, and we're just slowly destroying it.
We're at a point now where there's a bill being debated, which we've talked about in a previous episode, where they want to make like these data centers that want to come in. They say, okay, you can come in, but you've got to produce your own energy. Otherwise, you can't come in. I mean, that's where we're at this point, where they know that we're in such a crisis with energy that, Pritzker's big thing is we're going to save our economy by bringing in these data centers. But first, before you come in, you've got to produce your own energy. I mean, what data center is going to do that when there's welcoming states with better business environments, better and more reliable energy grids? They're going to go there. They're not coming here. If they've got you produce your own energy and now you're allowed to come to our state. They're not doing it.
Here's what I fear. Here's what I fear, Collin. And we saw this happen with 3 Mile Island. You're going to get a data center that wants to come here, and they're going to go directly to the Clinton nuclear power plant or to one of the Exelon power plants and go, look, we need X amount of bushel baskets of electricity. We know that you're currently getting $1 a bushel for it. We'll pay you $1.25 if you put us at the top of the line. We want our bushel baskets first. And that's what's going to happen. That's what happened with 3 Mile Island. Somebody that wants to come here, they'll go to these power generators and offer them a deal. And the rest of us will suffer because we're now down the food chain. We're going to have to go out and get more energy. We're going to have to go out on the market. It's already expensive. It's absolutely egregiously expensive. And it's going to get worse if that's what they're going to do. That's how they're going to get their energy.
It's interesting. We'll play this tape in years when that happens and prove that you were right, because that's an interesting thought. I mean, God forbid we go out and build some clean, environmentally safe nuclear power plants to actually decarbonize our energy sector. But whatever, that's common sense. We shouldn't be talking
Sorry about that. The other thing that I recommended, and we asked for a study, how do we reunite Illinois? When they did this deregulation, they split Illinois, PJM and MISO. What would it take to put Illinois back together again? Man, oh man, oh man, people didn't like that. But we've got all the nuclear power plants in northern Illinois that are exporting energy all across the country. If we directed that electricity to our grid here in Illinois like they used to before this deregulation, we'd be fine. We'd be an exporter again. But we've got to break this MISO PJM back and become just like Texas and a couple of other states where we are our own grid. and we produce our own energy. We've got the ability to do it. I recommended that we look at it. There was supposedly a study commissioned a couple of years ago, and man, everybody squealed like a pig.
Interesting. Let's go over to pensions. We can't not talk pensions if Mark Batinick is on the podcast. So, Mark, I just want to pose a quick question, which is we've heard for a long time that pensions there's going to be something done, but then it got real quiet, and we are dangerously close to May 31st, or wee hours of June 1st, and I've heard very little to diddly squat about this. So clearly something's being done quietly, and we're not supposed to know. What do you think is being done? What should we be aware of as people who are watching Springfield right now?
Well, your question you posed here on your format sheet here said, will lawmakers quietly spike pension costs yet again? My answer is yes. So look, it's going to be a matter of what they do. So you had the big ask that was kind of the shock and awe. That was the $30 billion, which basically made everybody in tier 2, tier 1. Then you had a skinny version of that, which I believe was HB 2540, which is about a $5 billion cost to the state. You're probably going to have a similar cost to the locals, which is a skinnier version. You have the one issue that at some point you do have to deal with. That's the very small safe harbor issue. But I think they're using this very small issue to try to spike pensions this much. I mean, and for those of you who don't understand what the safe harbor issue is, I'm going to make it really simple because there's one important point with it. It's that the wage base where you stop taking money for your retirement is calculated differently because of inflation. They're separating at different rates, and the state one is lower than the Social Security one. So tier 2 is better than Social Security in almost every single situation, but over time there is that separation. The people who are affected now are the very highest income earners. It's not the $65,000 a year teacher, the $75,000. It is the very top of the tippy top earners that might be affected by this. So it's not this deal like, oh my gosh, we better do this session, otherwise we're in trouble. But I do think they're going to put something else. They're going to do a lot of things, my guess. In that, and it'll probably be backloaded. If you look at the COGFA studies that they had done on some of the bills that were filed, it actually has it's a little accounting trickery. They say they're going to be 100% funded, but only 5 years later. Well, we're supposed to be 90% funded by I think 2045. That pace puts them at 80% funded, so they actually spike pensions and save money the next several years in terms of their annual payments. Really nice little sleight of hand. So I'll be interested to see if they do that, and I'd be interested to see what the rating agencies say if you add $5 billion worth of liabilities to the pension costs and fund it at a lower rate, even though you're going for 100%, you're going for 100% at a farther rate down the road. So I do think something will happen, mainly because of the safe harbor issue. The one thing that I've been asking for years is that, and we've been talking about the safe harbor issue, pensions are actually at or near a peak of a percentage of our overall budget. And it's been shrinking. We peaked at 27.9% of the budget in 2017, and we've been going down since. What that means, and this is where they got $2 billion for non-citizens to get healthcare last year, is what that means as that spread continues, it opens up money for new spending in the budget. So one of the most frustrating things in this is they already have extra money. The pension cost in terms of a percentage of the budget is decreasing. I'd like to see that return to the public in terms of property taxes. I think property taxes are the most decimating tax on seniors, unemployed, the poor. It's a regressive tax. It's way worse than sales tax. It's way worse than an income tax. We need property tax relief to get businesses with a big footprint back to Illinois. You could do something that would cost $0, and that's simply say, okay, we're going to do this to spike pensions, but as the pension costs decrease in terms of a percentage of the budget, that's going to go to property tax relief. That would be the type of bill I would actually support, and we would be good for the state long term. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be the way that you could actually increase pensions and do it in a way that the taxpayer isn't getting totally screwed.
Isn't there a part of this where they're using the safe harbor issue as a way to make some other changes they've always wanted to do, which is the retirement age, the cost of living adjustments? There's this is their excuse, because if they just wanted to address the safe harbor thing, it'd be a tiny change, very little budget impact, and I think we'd all agree that fine, we get it, you have to do that, but everything else they're adding to it isn't required.
No,
that is totally correct. Yep.
Yeah, one of the bills was switching everything back to the way it was, which didn't make any sense at all. I mean, we're talking by, I'm just reading something, 2026, we're going to be $1 billion more for taxpayers, just for a few pension systems. That doesn't even account for municipalities or counties. I mean, $1 billion. It's impossible to live here.
Well, and Sharon, I think you just brought up something that isn't talked about enough, which is, these municipalities are shouldering a significant burden here on pensions as well. We keep looking at the big state systems, but any changes that are made are going to have an impact well beyond just the state budget. And municipalities are already struggling under that weight. And so if you want to talk about property taxes, most of these municipalities, most of these townships, these different entities, really the only place they have to go is that property tax burden. So when you make a change to pensions, it goes straight down to that property tax burden on working families.
And here's one of the most important points that I say about that property tax burden. That's extremely frustrating that Republicans should not let Democrats get away with. A person in Harvey, majority minority, poor Harvey, pays 4 times the property tax rate that a person in Winnetka pays. 4 times. Now, how can you get away with a system like that if you're a Democrat and say that you're the protector of the poor, you're the protector of the minorities, when you're literally screwing them with the property tax system that we have?
Yeah, well, in a city where you see the what have we talked about before, Mark? That the wealth gap and the income gap or whatever it is between the minorities and lowest income, it's just we've struggled with this.
We're 50th in racial economic equity.
There we go. I was looking for the term
between all those things. Yeah, 50th, dead last.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem: is who's going to pay for it, and then of course, at what point do we start to be more fiscally responsible? Because I would love it. I've said this for a while. I would love it if we could just sit down and say, let's look at our budget. Let's look at the state of Illinois for not just this year, but the next 10, 20 years. And I think you could get the people of Illinois to understand, okay, you know what? If we've got to do something for a few years to get us over the gap, but then you're going to get stuff back on the back end and we're going to be more fiscally responsible. Like we could have that sort of grand discussion and everyone put some skin in the game and we can really get to a good spot. But we do this patchwork thing every year where in the end, it just always seems like the taxpayers are the ones who end up getting screwed. All right, let's go to our next topic here. We kind of hinted at it before when Sharon decided to pull a Pritzker and advocate for violence in politics. I tease because I love you. But let's talk about this because obviously this starts with a horrible thing to have to bring up this conversation. But the shooting at the embassy, the Israeli embassy in D.C., where a young couple was shot. The gentleman who did it was from Chicago. I guess I shouldn't even say gentleman. The guy who did it is from Chicago, Elias Rodriguez. He yelled "Free Palestine" as he did it. And of course, it's yet another Chicago tie here. And I know I always like to blame Pritzker for everything, but the more and more that our governor advocates for, ramping up the rhetoric and don't give them a moment of peace, and the anger and the violence in politics continues to increase, and we have this language continuing. I just want to point to Rachel Ventura, a bill that she was pushing. She said this in that statement when she was pushing her bill to allow the state of Illinois to invest in companies that are boycotting Israel. She said this: now more than ever, we need to send a strong message that the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and continuous human rights violations inflicted by the state of Illinois will not be supported with state dollars. And then there were other people with other quotes. I actually took a screenshot, so I got to pull it up. But I saw people online that were saying, don't give these people a moment of peace until Israel changes. Here we go. Let me just get this right. Let me pull it up. Here we go. Nonviolent methods alone have never liberated anyone. Israelis must be made to feel unwelcome and unsafe everywhere as long as they occupy Palestine. I mean, this is the environment we're in right now, that if you disagree with me, you just need to be made to feel unwelcome. There are people cheering this guy who killed this young Israeli couple. I mean, this is where we're at right now. So I don't know where this goes. Just go ahead with your thoughts, but we got to talk about this.
Collin, I've got, I have Jewish people in my own family. Married in. I have friends who are Jewish, and they're afraid. And it's that they're not wearing their Star of David's. They're hiding everything that identifies them as being Jewish, which is so sad, and that's unacceptable. But yet, you don't hear people complaining about it. You don't hear people, trying to say, well, this is wrong. They pretend to, but you just don't, like the anti-Semitism going on. I hear it all the time from people. I hear comments, and I'm always astounded because I wasn't raised that way, and I guess I was a little sheltered as a child, but my parents were standing up for all the people that no one else was standing up for, and that's the way we were raised. And to see what's going on now, and watching it, and having people like Pritzker, who claims he's Jewish but doesn't practice, he's just a fake. And it's everyone's job to step up, whether you're a politician, whether you're a baker, I don't care what you do, but everyone should be stepping up and putting these people in their places.
Well, and you have Pritzker's statement. I'll just read one quote. Americans of all backgrounds have an urgent obligation to stand for peace. And then he goes to the next Democratic primary, for president function where he says, fight, 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 fight. I mean, the fact that he's allowed to get away with this doublespeak drives me crazy.
So, first of all, Israel left Palestine. They had settlements in there. They left. They gave them everything, and Palestinians spent all the money. They elected Hamas, and they spent all the money on bombs and guns and everything else instead of building a premium society. So they did actually peacefully leave. Thank God we're not talking about President Harris right now, because who knows what would be happening in the Middle East. It's such projection when people in the Democratic Party like to call Republicans Nazis, and it's a term that shouldn't be used very easily. But if there's any party that has people in it trying to emulate Nazis, it's the Democrats.
Well, and I was watching a video of the protest they did where they had like a line from Chicago to DuPage County. And I saw someone waving a sign that said, make racists scared again, was one of the people that was waving that sign in the protest. And it's just, first of all, that idea that someone I disagree with should be scared to be alive. The fact that that's being waved at a protest on the left, I don't love that idea. But it's this, in the same line, there's people, attacking Israel and saying, free Palestine and cheering when something like this happens. Like the same people cheering that this happened are the same people saying, make racists afraid. Like it's you can be racist against Israel, but nobody else, apparently. Or you can be racist against Israel and white people, but nobody else. Like it's this environment we're in right now where the left is, has lost all ties to reality, frankly.
Yeah. And these aren't right-wing extremists. These aren't Republicans that are shutting down the roads. And I made a couple of notes, and here's my message to the Democrats. And this is inexcusable. But what they've done is, over the last 4 years is, they've excused the mobs, going back to George Floyd. They peaceful protests. They defended these chants, from the river to the sea. They've allowed people to wear masks and wave these flags of Hamas and Al Qaeda and terrorists, and they've allowed these folks to march through our cities and take over. We've seen them take over interstates, shut down communities, and not a word of condemnation from the Democrats, not one word. And now we have 2 people dead in Washington, D.C. One of the lady that was murdered was in a meeting with my wife last week at the Israeli embassy. And this hits close to home for her and me.
Preach.
And this blood is on the hands of the Democrats in this country. Yeah. And thank goodness that we have President Trump. Thank goodness that we have a Department of Justice and an FBI now that are not going to excuse this behavior, and we're deporting people who are fomenting violence in our country. But this isn't Republicans doing this. This isn't conservatives doing this. This isn't the MAGA movement that are out attacking people. This is Democrats, and they own it. And I didn't see what happened on the House floor this morning, but did they condemn? Did we see people on the House floor on the other side of the aisle?
No. I mean, they'll condemn if they don't like that someone from DC came in for a press conference, but they're not going to condemn something like this. Yeah. I mean, the reality.
Where's Bob Morgan? Was Bob Morgan? I didn't see it. Did Bob Morgan say something today?
He did put out a quote. He did not on the floor, but he did put out a quote. So, Dan, you make an interesting point, Dan, one that we haven't talked about enough, which is, violence escalates if you allow it to. We've allowed the anti-Israel protests and actions to continue to intensify. And we're like, well, no, that's their right. But they've gotten more and more violent, and here now people are dead. You make a really solid point on that, Dan, that had we stepped in earlier and said, listen, you have a right to free speech, but not a right to this violence, maybe this could have been avoided, and 2 young people would still be alive today.
Collin, one of the things that I always try to live my life based on is is I always pronounce this man's name wrong, but the pastor Martin Niemöller
Okay.
from when World War II. And he's the one who wrote first, they came from the socialists, and then eventually you get down to where, then they came from me and there's nobody else to speak
Right.
up. Well, that's the way I try to live my life, because I'm always the one who's jumping in when I shouldn't be. And everyone's like, why are you getting involved? Well, because it's the right thing to do. And, sometimes I can be pain in the butt, but it's the right thing to do. And I think we've lost that. We've lost that humanity out of people. We just don't help people anymore. We don't stick up for the right things anymore, just in general. It's the regular, because we're all too self-centered and too much into our own world.
We could have a whole discussion and a whole podcast about that. That's for sure, especially since COVID. Let me take us to our next topic, though, because it's on a similar thing. This topic is there's a lot here to talk about under Naperville, because it seems like Naperville's been in the news a bit in the last week. I almost titled this "What the hell is going on in Naperville?" But we'll start with this. At the Naperville School District in 203, I'm sure you've seen it on social media. There was a biological male who competed in girls' sports. Josh McBloom, the DuPage County Republicans. Josh is on the Naperville City Council. Awake Illinois and a number of groups have gone out and spoken. It's become a big deal and a big issue. A lot of girls were crying because they were in that track meet, and obviously they lost because this biological male beat them by a large margin. And we're talking about seventh graders. Let's be clear here. We're talking about young kids who are going through this. I got a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to go first. I'll let you guys go first. So what are your thoughts on this?
I'll go first on that, especially being the girl in the room. I did a lot of research recently on the subject for someone else recently, but some of the things that people aren't pointing out is, boys have a 10% bigger lung capacity than women. Their knee joints are made differently to allow them to run better. Our hips are wider, so they don't have, we're going to run slower because our hips are wider. Our heart is smaller. And by the time you're 10 years old, you don't get to reverse these things. They're already impacted. Your body is already done. It's already developed those things. So there are multiple studies out there that show that no matter how many hormones you take at 10, 11, 12, 20 years old, you are always 100% going to have an advantage over women being a male born person, no matter what your surgeries are. There are study after study after study. Why are we not listening to the science? It's kind of like, do the math.
Trust the science, but maybe not in this.
I don't need science to tell the difference between a boy and a girl. I mean,
I don't either.
Are you done, Sharon? Because I don't want to step on toes.
But it's the point of the fact that if there is documentation, it's documented that there is no way for a female to ever be able to compete on the same level as a male born person.
Yeah. So here's
I'm gonna play my moderator card here and let Mark go first. Go ahead, Mark.
So we pulled this in Deerfield. We had a similar situation in Deerfield recently, right? We pulled the Deerfield School District. Deerfield, North Shore, everybody represented by a liberal Dem. It came back 75% to 25% against boys being in women's sports. This is one of those situations where somebody says something and everybody's afraid to speak up, and the loud minority has been getting their way and knocking on the door. We should be busting the door down as Republicans on this issue. It's insane. I do not need a biological study. I do not need all this stuff. I have eyes. I'm 55 years old. They don't belong in the same locker room. They don't belong in the same sport. It's absolutely lunacy. And I think the public wants somebody to stand up and say that in many ways, like Trump has. It is a huge winning issue. And the people that don't agree with it are in some far left la la land, believing some weird ass ideology that I don't know where they got it from. But normal people do not think that this should be allowed. It's not normal. And a lot of young kids are being harmed very seriously. I've talked to counselors on this, and he's told me stories about, 99.9% of the time, gender dysphoria is just some kid that's growing up. and have some weird situation going on, and they figure it out when they're adults, and they're literally ruining people's lives and ruining their bodies. It's weird.
Well, and Mark, I always hate this. Like, he's a Republican pollster, he's a Democrat pollster, but obviously you've been labeled as a Republican pollster. So I just want to give the balance here. Let me share a New York Times poll from January, just for those who may say, well, that's Mark's polling and he's a Republican. Let me just share a New York Times poll from January, which said 79% of respondents said biological males who identify as women should not be allowed to participate in women's sports. And among Democrats, even, it was 67% who said, who agreed with that. So if you don't necessarily believe what Mark said because he's a Republican, there you go. There's the New York Times, and they're saying the same thing.
So let's talk about what happened on the House floor when this was brought up, and the two ladies who stood up.
Which one? Which time was it? Which time?
The first time when Blaine talked and Adam talked, and they said, this family didn't want this controversy, and they did. So if they didn't want this controversy, why did they put their son in a girls' track meet?
Right.
If they didn't want this controversy, so this is. I agree with Mark, and this is a winning issue. We've been on it. The two girls at the Springfield YMCA, when the men showed, when that guy showed up in their dressing room and they got kicked off the swim team. We've been on this, the conservative Republicans, and I'm sure that the other Republicans in the House, would like to have joined in. We've done this. We've been with Riley Gaines. This is a winning issue, and if you're running for office against someone that believes that men should be in women's sports, pound them on it. Pound them on it.
We do have to give credit.
One of the things I want to make clear, though, because part of the point of this podcast is to make sure we're doing things effectively as a party and trying to help people around the state. I do want to add one word of caution here, which is when you let the other side play the sympathy card, you start to lose ground. And so the one mistake that was made here was sharing the name and image of this young, if you want to call him boy, call her a girl, I don't care what you want to call them, this transgendered individual, sharing their name, their image, and plastering it everywhere, you allow the other side to use the sympathy card there of saying, you're attacking a minor here. So we've got to, just again, as a word of caution, we have a winning issue here until we friggin' screw it up. And one of the ways you can screw it up is show that you don't care about the individual themselves, that you hate all transgendered people. One of the people from this story who came out said, that they're here because they don't believe that transgendered people have a right to exist. Don't give them that talking point. And I think too much we end up in the fight about just hating or being against all transgendered issues, and that's not the fight here. That's where we lose it. Where we win it is staying on the safe ground here of protecting women's sports. And you know what? Yes, that young transgendered individual has the opportunity to participate in sports. They can participate in boys' sports. So we would love to have them participate in sports. Or let's talk about maybe having like we have the Special Olympics, let's have a transgender Olympics. I don't know what the solution is, but they do. That individual does deserve to be allowed to play sports too. And that's where we lose this here, is you can lose it if you make it about the individual or you make it seem like you just hate them or hate all transgendered people. And so that's my word of caution to our audience. Mark's right. Dan's right. Sharon's right. This is absolutely a winning issue for us, but you lose it when you let the other side play the sympathy card. So just be careful.
Well, I think Tom Weber, bringing people down, showing people, bringing the young girls down to talk about it, not, to the public. I mean, that's what people need to see. They need to see these young girls that are being affected by this and that are being harassed, and, they're getting, death threats against them because they didn't want to swim against somebody. They didn't want to run against somebody. And, when you get, and the other thing that kind of bothers me as a female is I cannot understand why more entire female teams are not standing together and refusing to do any sport altogether if there's a transgender. Because if that happens, there won't be any sports, period. And guess what? There's going to be a lot of people very unhappy. Well, if that's what needs to be done, then that's what needs to be done. These entire teams of girls need to stick together and stand up for what's right. And it's really disappointing to see that they're not doing that.
No. At a time when
don't you blame
we're
the
finally
parents?
seeing movement and improvement when it comes to women's sports, girls' sports, and we've seen over the last 5, 10 years. I don't know the timeline, but finally seeing significant improvement. And now this. Now we're gonna have men screw it up yet again. All right, let me keep us moving here. I know we don't have a. Oh wait, hold on. We're on Naperville, and what the hell is wrong with Naperville? Why did I say that? Because it's not the only time Naperville was in the news this week for just crazy crap. There was an individual who was holding a sign in downtown Naperville. I'm gonna see if I could find the name of the sign. It was something like transgendered men are women are men, or it was something like that. I don't have it saved here in my notes. But then a couple who used to be in California who now live in Naperville went and attacked him, were screaming at him. The cops were called, and the man literally said in front of the cops, if the cops weren't here, I'd beat the living blank out of you. All because this guy was, waving a sign that they disagreed with. That's Naperville for you right now. But it's not the only thing happening in Naperville. We've got two different teen takeovers, basically. It's not just happening in Chicago. We had 2 times now in the last week where you had significant instances of young people, of teens coming in, not just from Naperville, but all around. You have to question why they think Naperville is a safe place to come and do this. That's certainly a question. And then there was the 10th arrest at the Naperville Top Golf because of drugs and guns. I mean, every time I read the news, it seems like once a week there's another arrest at the Naperville Top Golf. I mean, what the hell is going on in Naperville is my question.
It's changed. There used to be, years ago, Naperville was kind of a dump. And then everything changed once they got the boardwalk going and the river walk. And then just in the last probably 3 years, it's really started to go back down the tubes again.
Well, you can say, I mean, it is the heart of liberal politics in the western suburbs, and I think we're seeing the fruits of that every time we read the news.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. So I know we don't have necessarily political guests, though. All of you guys have political bones in your body. So we don't have to spend a ton of time here, but this is a bit of a catch-all topic in case there's something you guys really want to cover. There's been some developments in the last week, and I know Michael and Chris they were texting me. They're all frustrated because they wanted to talk about this stuff. So don't worry, guys. You'll get to talk about it next week. But Lauren Underwood saying she's not going to run for U.S. Senate. That's a significant development. You've got moving in the 9th District congressional race on the Democratic side. Both Biss and Fine are announcing endorsements and fundraising. You've got a lot of movement in the 8th congressional district race with Kevin Morrison announcing his fundraiser and some endorsements. One of the other contenders there, Yasmin Benkoli, has announced a bunch of endorsements. Hopefully I got her name right. You've got a Schneider in the 10th, and the Democratic side is going to have a primary. Doesn't look like an overly strong primary, but it's another Democratic primary where an incumbent's being challenged on the left. And we have word that maybe Jed Davis might jump in the race for the 14th on the Republican side. So at least one Republican development here. Anything in the political stuff, whether it was something I covered or something else you want to cover, this is like our catch-all if you guys want to talk politics.
If I was buying a ticket in Vegas for the Dem primary for U.S. Senate, it would be on Raja. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I mean,
he is ruthless.
Pre-Underwood making her decision, I was on record saying if she got in and if she ran to the left, I thought she'd shock everybody. Yep. Obviously, now she's not getting in. I'm sure there's some deal that was cut that we'll find out at some point here what Underwood's going to be given in exchange for not getting in. But this does help Dems. Let's be real here. If Raja and Stratton don't have to run to the far left to win their primary, this helps them a lot. And so I certainly am hopeful someone else gets in this race. But, if nobody else does get in, Raja's going to own central southern Illinois. He's going to own certain demographics that Stratton's just not going to play in. So, Mark, you're not crazy with that.
Yeah, I think I really thought Underwood was going to get in. She's an attractive candidate. She's got I think, a good base up in the northern part of Illinois. But I think what happened was just my own personal opinion is that they felt that if they did not have an incumbent in that congressional district, it could flip. And I think that's what Jed saw. I think Jed saw that Underwood was going to run for Senate. It was going to be an open seat. And I think a Republican would have a chance in an open seat. I don't know now.
Well, to your point, well, I don't know that necessarily it would be a favorite to flip. It does put the race in play if Underwood is out. She overperforms by 5 points when we look at our baseline and her performance. So her out of that race makes it more like a D5 district instead of being a D10 district where they're in it. So it certainly puts it way more in play with Underwood out of it. Were they scared about the district? I'm not sure that we're in that kind of an environment yet in 2026. Maybe if we see this big, beautiful bill do everything that it's promising, maybe things will change between now and next November. At the moment, Dems seem super overconfident, which I hope plays in our advantage. But I guess my question would be: does Jed run now that he'd be running against the incumbent instead of it being an open seat? I would imagine that probably comes into the calculation. I'd love to see Jed Davis do it. While Martyr is a very, very nice guy, Jed Davis would be a stronger candidate there. But does he do it? Give up his House seat to run for this with Underwood still in the race? That's an open question.
And I think Underwood pulled out because Pritzker promised his money to Stratton already. So I mean that's it's kind of, as anybody has a problem running against someone with billions of dollars behind you, it really limits it. But I have to say, I know Kevin Morrison's a Dem, but I always did like that kid. So
So Sharon, I talked about it. I think it was last week, but not a lot of people, pay attention to the 8th District stuff since Raja's been there for a while. But Kevin, to me, he was the tip of the spear in Cook County when they started to go from blue to deep blue, especially on the county board level. And Kevin was a little bit more towards the center then. I don't know if you've watched the last 2, 3, 4 years, but he's kind of gone off the deep end on the left. So if Kevin Morrison is the Kevin Morrison of when he first got elected, I think you're not wrong that he could be a little bit more of a balanced, sort of more moderate member. But unfortunately, the way his politics have gone the last 2, 4 years, he's not the same, more centered. He's definitely more far left now. So
no, but he would be better than Raj, that's for sure.
I'm not sure. Again, just look at the last couple of years. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Raj. Never have been.
Yeah. Well, either way, and I know, listen, we don't have a ton of time, but any thoughts on, Pritzker said he's going to announce by July what his intentions are. Do we have a reasonable, a decent candidate who has a decent shot on the Republican side for U.S. Senate? Anybody have thoughts, or y'all just want to leave that one alone today?
Well, yeah, I was actually going to do this as my closing thought, but I'm going to move it to the top. If it's not there's a lot of people looking at governor right now. Okay. If you don't have it in your gut to run against JB, don't run. I don't think it's going to be easier if it's somebody else anyway. I would rather run with somebody with a record. But if it's not in you to run against JB, if you're not in it to run because you want to run and what you want to do for the state, just stop talking about it. Stop yanking everybody's chain and move on. You have to have, in order to win in a state like this, you have to be willing to take on JB to have a chance to win anyway. So
gross
that's
cojones or stop wasting our time. Is that the point?
Exactly.
Well, and let's not run just because you want to put another notch in your belt. We've got, which way I'm going on that, Collin. But when you have people that are totally disingenuous, running around saying they're going to run for governor, having all kinds of fundraisers just to raise money, and you just got to sit there and go, well, why is that person doesn't have a chance in hell, but yet why are they raising money for themselves? Well, you got to think it's for something else.
Interesting. We'll have to see how that plays out. All right, let's go to our second to last segment, which is our news you can use. This segment we go through decently quickly. Really, it's to equip you, our audience, with things you should be aware of. You should be talking on social media, using this to raise money. These are things that you can use to show the contrast with how crazy the far left has become in this state, and how reasonable Republican leadership could certainly make a difference. A couple bills here that we got to talk about. So House Bill 3248, I'm not sure how this one snuck through without getting my notice, at least until recently. But the chair of the Illinois Democratic Party and a few others have joined in to push this bill that would require insurance companies to cover laser hair removal. Now, some of this, at first I was scratching my head, so I read it, and some of this makes sense. There are some health conditions where laser hair removal is a requirement, and for those health conditions, okay, makes sense. But of course, in here is also gender dysphoria. So essentially, it would mean that we all, when we pay our health insurance premiums, would be paying to make sure that those people who decide they wish to transition their genders, we pay to get their laser hair removal. I've got to imagine there's a number of people probably not in favor of this.
If they're going to get their hair removed and get it paid for, then I sure as hell to do it. it's kind of ridiculous. There's things called razors, and they're about a buck, and a little bit of shaving cream or soap. You can get it.
Now, listen, I got made fun of my entire lifetime because I got the Sean Connery look down here. Like at some point that affected my mental health, and I certainly would have had a better childhood if I wasn't made fun of constantly for having a hairy chest. So
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, even, going through fertility, I have, you end up, anybody who's been on fertility medication tends to get more hair on their face.
Hmm.
So that's something that I'm constantly battling with,
Hmm.
even with blonde hair. But I don't get to go to the doctor and get that taken care of. I have to use creams or, whatever I need to do. But, and, that's because it was medical. But again, still, I think it's silly. We can't pay for everything. Let's stick to the things that are most important.
I actually had somebody tell me once, an elected official, tell me that if I had hair, I could run for Congress.
Well,
So maybe,
Yeah.
I'm follically challenged and that's a disability. And
There you go.
yeah, it's just silly. All this stuff is silly. We got to get back to the basics. We can't pay our bills and we're going to be paying for this kind of crap.
Well, and people got to realize this goes straight to your health insurance premium. Every time the Dems push forward one of these sweeteners, one of these things down in Springfield, where does it come out of? This is why your health insurance premiums skyrocket. Yes, medical costs are going up, certainly. But if you look at the letters put out by Blue Cross and some of these companies, they're listing dozens and dozens and dozens of bills that Springfield pushed forward that each one of them they got to cover, which means all of our rates got to go up to cover this stuff. So it goes straight to your cost of living.
I do think it's important to note to the viewers, this passed the Senate.
Yeah.
This isn't some bill. Like a lot of times you have these bills that are just somebody files it, nobody votes on it, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go to committee, doesn't get called. This already passed one of the chambers. And I would say it passed the more conservative chamber. So I would say the likelihood of this being law is highly likely.
Interesting. Let's go to the next one, House Bill 3027. There's a Democrat. I won't say where she's from. I'll let you guess as our audience, and I'll fill you in at the end. But a Democrat who wants to say that minors cannot get diet pills or protein supplements without a doctor's note or a parent with them. But this same Democrat wants to make sure that your minor daughter can get a sex change or an abortion without parental approval. Where is this Democrat from? Of course, Naperville. That seems to be the theme of our episode. But this is just the craziness of the far left that you need parental permission to take protein supplements, take diet pills, but parents shouldn't get in the way. And as a matter of fact, they should be labeled an abuser if you stop them from getting a sex change or an abortion.
My son has a persistent plantar's wart, and he's about to get his driver's license. And I was at the doctor because he has to go the doctor said, hey, you got to come every 3 weeks so we kill this thing. And I said, oh, my son's about to get his driver's license. This is going to be great. I don't have to take off from work to get him to the doctor. He's like, oh, no, it's a procedure. You need to take, so to get for wart removal, you need you need a parent there. But all this other stuff, yeah, crazy. It's just crazy. It just makes no sense.
Collin, I give my dogs protein supplement powder. So if they're going to make it illegal for kids, I can't even imagine what I'm going to have to go through to get it for my.
Yeah, fair. I'll leave this one alone for me. But next one, House Bill 3564. We have talked about it before, but there's been an amendment now, or at least it's being considered. And so if you remember, as we talked about this bill before, it would raise rents to stop fees and move-in fees and all sorts of different, the fees. And some of that may make some sense. But this latest change now adds into that as well that landlords cannot charge a fee, or at least not a fee above a tiny amount, for an eviction. So they're going to have to raise rents. Because obviously, if you're a landlord, if you own property, you've got to recoup these costs in some way. And why is everybody paying higher rent? Because now they can't charge additional fees to those who decide they don't want to actually pay. And so yet again, going straight to the cost of living, rents are going to go up for those who can't afford a home, all because we got to take care of those people who had to be evicted because they weren't paying their bills. Welcome again to the state of Illinois.
Yeah, I think the worst thing about this is all these sorts of bills do the exact opposite of what they're trying to intend, because you're making it so somebody doesn't want to be a landlord. If they don't want to be a landlord, there's less buildings that are built, there's less conversions, everything else. So the few people there have a higher rate. It has such the exact opposite effect of the people that they're trying to help. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I know people who have left Cook County in real estate for a whole host of reasons, and it is already so hard to get somebody kicked out of an apartment, and so people just don't want to do business there anymore, and that's why you're not seeing the housing supply that they need.
Well, that Mike Glasser, the president of the Neighborhood Building Owners Alliance, said the exact same thing. That right now the conversation is over affordable housing and having more affordable housing for people, and this is going to go straight to making that even harder.
Well, they expect people to, they expect the landlords to pay for somebody's background check or anything like that. And, when my grandmother died, my parents rented out their condo. And, lo and behold, we had this couple that destroyed the entire inside. Their kids wrote all over the walls. The toilets were broke. It was destroyed. Talking about $10,000 worth of damage. But add that in and having to evict them and go to court. This went on for months. Well, who's going to pay that attorney? How can I not take that out? That stuff has to come back. My parents didn't have any money. They were barely making it. So
let's go to the next one here. Just want to keep us moving along so we can get to our OGs and clowns. So next one here. So there was a hearing, and the Senate Republicans after that hearing are calling for Pritzker's Department of Corrections to step down or be removed. Jason Plummer, Terry Bryant, some others. Kudos to them for calling this out here, because during that hearing, it was abysmal. The entire hearing, it was painful. But even during that, Pritzker's Department of Corrections couldn't even say how many inmates had died this year under her care. And this is what we see over and over. Plummer made this point. This is the inability to manage government from Pritzker. We just see it over and over and over again. This kind of I don't know what you would term it, but the inability to just do the basics within his administration, from division to division to division. We see this, and yet again here, there's another example. So kudos to the Senate Republicans for calling out on this. Anybody have any quick thoughts? I wouldn't even say it was mismanagement. It's just a complete lack of ability to do the basics. But I'm blanking on the word. It will come to me the moment we stop recording. All right, second to last one here. Let's talk about the CTA. They want a giant bailout from taxpayers. Why should we do it? Here's a good example of maybe why we shouldn't. The Red Line extension that's been much ballyhooed, which started off over a decade ago, that it was just going to cost us 1.9 or 09 billion. Well, now that has exploded to 5.75 billion, $1 billion a mile, and is now being called one of, if not the most expensive transit project in the world. And we're talking above ground here. This isn't subway. This is an above ground project. And of course, no shocker, CTA and their mismanagement, City of Chicago, nobody's surprised that this cost has exploded. But at a time when the CTA would like taxpayers to bail them out from all their fiscal mismanagement over the years, this isn't a great look.
Sounds like the California bullet train to me.
Instead of a bridge to nowhere, we have now a train to nowhere. So
yeah, this is so typical. We pay a lot more. I think we pay more than twice per lane mile to pave road in Illinois versus Minnesota. I'm not talking about Texas. I'm not talking about Indiana. I don't want to hear all you people on the left talk about, they don't pay living wages. I'm talking about the state that you guys hold as the model, Minnesota. We pay more than 2 times what Minnesota pays per lane mile to build road. It's insane.
Well,
this is what happens when we have governance.
Sorry, Mark.
Go ahead, Sharon.
I'm going to bring up something that came up just within the last week or so. Is that I just happened to see it on the Daily Herald. Apparently, because we have the 4% extra room for if your company is in Illinois, you get a 4% extra for your bid to be for the roads. Well, so the tollway.
Yeah, we talked about it last week.
Oh, okay. Gave it to the wrong guy. And, what we figured out, I talked to the reporter, not only did Walsh get their entire contract, they also got the extra for all the overtime. And then the other company got I don't know. We figured it out to be about $45 million.
Yeah, $45 million. Last week we gave kudos to Tom Weber about this, about calling him out and shining a spotlight on it, because $45 million of taxpayer dollars actually means something, and we should be fighting for it. Yeah. All right, last one here. I've been doing this the last couple of weeks, but since we struggle so badly nationally on messaging and talking points, I've been trying to share some things for our audience just to help with the conversation. And as we fight over tariffs, the whole point, as we said, the whole point of tariffs is made in America, create American jobs, build things in America again. So I want to point to something that was in the news this week that Kraft Heinz has announced that they're going to spend $3 billion to upgrade their manufacturing plants in America, specifically because of these tariffs. And again, we're seeing investments here in America because of the tariffs. Were they done poorly? Yes, we could have a whole episode about that. But the point is made in America. And so as you deal with this, as DC does you no good, Republicans throughout the state of Illinois, and helping you with this, at least you can push at the local level. This is the point, guys. Whether you agree or disagree with tariffs, which we can have a debate about it, the point is made in America, and we're seeing that there are some early signs of progress because of it. All right, let's go to our final segment here, our OG Clown of the Week. Anybody you want to nominate, either as an OG or a clown, you can do multiple, whatever you want to do. But anyone you think that deserves praise or scorn from the last week.
I'm in this week. I'm prepared. Last time I was caught praising my clown, and I'm not going to do that this week. Thank you. So we'll start with the clown, and I want to go to the Naperville School District. They completely botched, their responsibilities to protect their students, all of them, particularly the women, and they are for me the clown of the week. OG of the week,
and just I want to say seventh grade girls. Like we can lose.
Yes.
Seventh grade girls. Let's make that clear. This isn't. I mean, we know women is a catch-all, but let's just make that point.
It's the seventh grade girls, and it's the community that showed up. The vast majority of the people in that community, Mark's pointed out, it's a 75 to 80%, maybe even a higher, that don't want to see boys and girls sports. My OG of the week, I want to give the Freedom Caucus a shout out for their Doge presentation, for actually coming up with places that money could be cut. We say, the budget this, the budget that, but they actually have come up with these things ought to be looked at. These are places that we could actually save money. And that's the kind of advocacy we need. We need to be specific. We need to point things out. Unfortunately, I think that also got Fred Crespo bounced out of his own caucus. But, kudos to those guys for standing up and giving specifics.
Good.
Go ahead, Mark.
So I'm going to start with my OG of the week. I don't think he needs much of an explanation, just Fred Crespo. I think we talked about that enough. Great guy and great thinker. Reasonable. We need people like him in government. I have kind of a unique clown of the week. My daughter graduated from the University of Arizona last week, and I got to attend. My wife made me go to 2 graduation ceremonies instead of 1, and I got to listen to the student president of the University of Arizona. So the first thing he did is stand up, say what union he was a part of and what his union number was, and then proceeded to give a speech on how the 8-hour workday and the 5-day work week is racist. Kid you not, the way it's set up is racist, and I'm going to leave it at that. And I think the left is just trying to devise ways to be outraged, and sometimes the outrage is in conflict with each other, but whatever, they do it. So there you go. You can all know the 8-hour workday and the 5-day work week is racist.
Yeah, everything is, right? So to your point about Crespo, one of my clowns, and I'll have Lane bring this up on screen, is the Illinois House Democratic Twitter, because they clearly had this pre-planned ahead of time. Like, I know they didn't actually post it, but it was pretty hilarious to see that they had a happy birthday message to Crespo, what was like a day after he was kicked out of the caucus. So Lane will bring it up on screen for everyone to watch. I just thought that was deliciously ironic. Sharon, your thoughts on OGs and clowns?
I'm just going to bring up my clown, actually, which is an issue that really hasn't been talked about a whole lot. But I'm going to use my clown as IMRF and their executive director, who consistently makes excuses for not having their system up for a year and a half now, and is telling people that they have to pay their own medical for 3 months because they're not going to get paid their pension for 3 months. So it's costing some of our municipal employees close to $20,000 out of their own pocket, and they're pulling money out of their deferred comp to pay for their medical. It's really bad, and they just keep pretending like, oh no, everything's fine. So that's my clown.
Interesting. I'll do mine quickly here. A couple OGs. So the Senate Republican Caucus, every year they do a Memorial Day Wall of Remembrance. It's a good reminder this weekend what this is about, those who've given their lives for this country. So thank you to obviously all those who have given their lives, and kudos to the Senate Republicans. They've got a press conference today, Thursday, calling attention to it. I love that they do that every year. Also, Nicole Laha, just putting out being a mom. She got an award as Hyatt Magazine's Mother of the Year. I thought that was pretty cool. She's pushing her real world experience down in Springfield with some press releases, and I thought that was awesome. I'll jump to my clown real quick, which is Stephen Brady, who has made threats against Nicole Laha and threats against a public official. Deserves to be called out for it. Stop it. The violence in politics needs to stop. My last OG here before I go to my clowns officially, Scotty Scheffler. I don't watch golf as much as I used to, but Scotty won the PGA Championship, and it isn't for that. It's for this. Just seeing him and his wife and their young son interact. Then he goes in there to sign his card. You got the pictures of the son. Lane will bring it up on screen, but a picture of the boy on the floor there. I love the meme that was like, when you just won the PGA Championship, but your wife's been stuck watching the kids for 7 hours so you could play golf, so now it's your turn. I thought that was a lot of fun. So looking at my boy through the window now being all cute, and that makes me feel like Scotty and his son and OG. Couple clowns. I'll do it fast. This happened last week, and we didn't get a chance to get to it. Liza Streeter was caught embezzling from Rock Island County. But here's the real clown. It isn't necessarily just her as the clown here, but actually she was under a different name, Liza Wan, and back in 1990, she was caught embezzling from a bank, from Mercer County Bank, and yet still Rock Island County hired her, and then she embezzled $900,000 from Rock Island County taxpayers. So you kind of get what you asked for. You didn't do your due diligence. You hired her. What did you think was going to happen? Sun Times deserves a clown nomination for running AI generated content in the newspaper that was completely fake and false, with fake books that you could read in your summer reading. And any chance I have to ding the Sun Times, I'm going to take it. Let's talk about Connie Kane. After screwing up the Republican chances to win a winnable seat in 2022, she's now decided to change parties. She's a Democrat now, and she's going to run against Chris Lawson for treasurer out of Kane County. I and many others say good luck, goodbye. It's nice to get rid of you. We probably would have one more member of the House Republican caucus, and Suzanne Ness wouldn't even be there if Connie Kane hadn't screwed that up for us in 2022. My final clown, Jerry Reinsdorf and the Chicago White Sox, after getting destroyed by the Chicago Cubs over the weekend. If you even wanted, as a Sox fan, to turn it onto your TV, you couldn't, because thanks to Jerry, the White Sox aren't even on TV, which is probably good for all of our health. But as a White Sox fan, screw you. I really maybe occasionally would like to watch my damn team on the TV. That's it. Final closing thoughts. I know, Mark, because you're up against the time crunch, just in case you got to go ahead and go first.
You want to run for governor? Announce. Be willing to take on JB. That's my closing thought. I'm tired of everybody like in or out kind of talking about it. It's time. Let's go.
I agree wholeheartedly. Dan, your final thoughts.
So the Pope couldn't get your TV to work. That's amazing. I mean, how's the Pope watching the White Sox if Jerry's not showing it on TV?
Well, it's not blacked out outside of Chicago, so everyone outside of Chicago can watch it on the MLB app just weekend.
Whoa, I got a hitch on this, Colin. I watch the Sox game every night for free. It's called it's actually free again. It's on OTA. It's just over the air antenna. You just get yourself a little $10 antenna, and it's free. So maybe you need to go back to the 70s and figure that out.
So unlike Dan needing help to change his Zoom, I need somebody old to get me an antenna and help me set that up.
There you go.
I can help you, Colin.
Thanks for having me, Colin. I appreciate it and look forward to doing this again.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Sharon, you get the final word.
Final word is we just need to stand up for the right things.
I love it. You guys have been concise. Well done. We'll close down this episode next week. Michael and Chris are itching to talk politics. So come back to the smoke-filled room. We'll talk some politics next week. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. Be sure to celebrate the way it's meant to be celebrated. Thank those who have given their lives for the service of this country. Attend a parade or a memorial in your community. This is a somber weekend. Yes, you get a little time off work, but there's a meaning behind it. And make sure that you respect that and give it the appreciation it deserves. Thank you all for watching. We'll catch you next week.